Welcome to the BarBend podcast, where we talk to top athletes, coaches, influencers, and minds from around the world of strength sports. Presented by BarBend.com. Today on the BarBend podcast, I'm talking to strongman athlete, coach, and content creator Kalle Beck. Kalle has been involved in strongman for over a decade, and he became passionate about the sport at a time when there really wasn't a lot of coverage for it beyond the occasional World's Strongest Man broadcast, and there were practically no training resources available online. So through his website, startingstrongman.com, Kalle has built a community for strongman athletes and fans. He's also done a fantastic amount of work in increasing coverage and visibility for the sport, from the year's biggest events down to smaller qualifiers and competitions where, aspiring competitors can get their feet wet. I'm excited to chat with Kalle about strongman's growth and how mainstream exposure has changed the game. We'll also touch on the future of the sport and where Kalle's expanding his energy these days. And just a quick reminder, if you're enjoying the BarBend podcast, make sure to leave a rating and review in your podcast app of choice. This helps us stay on track in bringing you the best content possible week after week after week. And if there's someone you'd absolutely love to hear on a future BarBend podcast episode, let us know in your podcast review. I personally read each and every review, so your suggestions most definitely will be seen. So today I'm really excited to chat with Kalle Beck. Kalle's someone I've been lucky enough to chat with and work on some content with before. He's a strongman athlete and journalist who's really been on the forefront of bringing really good coverage to that sport over the past decade. So Kalle, thanks so much for joining us today. In recording this, we're just a few weeks out from World's Strongest Man. How are you feeling after the trip down to Florida?
I didn't go. I didn't go there. It's the craziest thing. And strongman journalism is I've traveled to the Arnold. I've done all this stuff. It's easier to cover from home, honestly.
Yeah.
You go to those venues, you're trying to post updates. No one's cell phone service works. I'm at the point now where people send me videos and let me know everything that's going on because they're cool. And, I've built a good community with Starting Strongman and everything. And, they kind of know that you're going to put it out and I have the voice and, the platform that people are going to watch. So, it's, I would have went just to support my friend Robert Oberst, but, with a 14-month-old baby and traveling across the country, it ended up being, 90 something degrees and storming half the time and 100% humidity. And they're long days. It just didn't seem like how I wanted to spend the family vacation.
Yeah, I understand. It's certainly easier to, having covered the CrossFit Games, the World Weightlifting Championships a few times, both in person and remotely. It's a heck of a lot easier to do it remotely. You can get things up faster. It's always nice to have someone, to have boots on the ground to send you that info.
Sure.
But as far as writing the recaps and putting up the content, there's nothing quicker than just being at your office or your home office with a reliable internet connection.
Yeah, it's so weird, but I'm glad that I did it well enough that you and other people thought I was there, even though I said over and over I wasn't going to be. But yeah, I get that a lot, so I guess I did it okay then. So it's still, regardless of going, I'm still recovering from it. Like it's a busy week. Let's
take a step back. I know you primarily as a content creator for the sport of strongman online, which is I think how a lot of people know you, whether they've come across startingstrongman.com or you on social media. How did you get involved with the sport initially, and how did you add journalist to your role of responsibilities in addition to being an athlete years ago?
It's interesting. So, I was always into lifting weights and stuff, and you start looking around online. This would be around, I think I started getting on different forums around 2005, 6, you get into powerlifting, the good old T Nation forums back then were pretty much all there was, pre-social media really. And just like Strongman, I watched it, and then I just saw someone post that they just competed at World's Strongest Man as a lightweight, which was at the time under 231 pounds. I didn't know that was a thing, and being, 5'7" and about 200 pounds, that seemed like something like, oh, well, I'm a 20-year-old kid and I think I can take on the world. I'm like, okay, I guess that's attainable. I know I'm not going to be 6'8" and whatever, but it seems like, I could work towards that, and just started searching, and there really was not much back then. As far as strongman, there's still amateur strongman with some weight classes. I found a show that had just happened in Santa Cruz, California, which is close to where, I lived and grew up. And I found some little rinky dink website that the promoter asked. I asked if he was going to have it again. He said it was his last year. I looked through they had like the list of athletes that competed. And I tried to find like someone who was close to me. And there's another guy in Santa Cruz. Everyone else was like all over the country. So I asked the promoter, I'm like, do you know anyone? And I saw this guy, lived in Santa Cruz, and, do you, have his email or phone number or something? So I gave him a call. It was my now good friend, Evan Hansman. And I just sent him an email, and he's like, yeah, you can come over, I guess. Are you strong? So, like, you really had to go out of your way to try to find this stuff back then. And, we trained, and it was fun. And I showed up, and it's in like there's all these redwood trees, and then we were just outside, in the mountains of Santa Cruz, and this guy with a shaved head and this big beard who's, 6'6" and 300 something pounds is like, kind of looked at me funny.
You didn't know if
like, you didn't know
you didn't know if he was going to train you or eat you.
Yeah, I still don't when I hang out with him, but and we just trained, and we trained some axle clean and press, I think some tire flips and some stones, and my entire body was like black and blue the next day. Had
you trained with those implements before?
No, I'd never, like back then, like there wasn't, you couldn't just go on like Rogue or Titan or wherever or Amazon and get this stuff shipped to you. Like everything was handmade. I think like Iron Mind was found, and Elite FTS might have sold a couple things, but all this stuff was I think we did Farmer's Walk, stones. I just saw this stuff, but he had me do continental cleans because I couldn't press the axle like with just a plate on the side, just because it was like 100 and something pounds empty, and weighed about as much as I did when you put a plate, and they didn't have any smaller plates. Like seriously. And he just had me do continental cleans for like 20 minutes where you pull it up to your stomach. And I remember my entire was just black and blue the next day. And I showed up and trained with him the next week, and I drive an hour and a half each way. So, and I compete over years, and you get more involved. And what I want to emphasize how, hard, like strange of an experience it was, because I remember I'd talk to other people, and they'd look at me, being a, under 200 pound guy, and being, less than average height. And they'd be like, you do strongman? And I just wanted, I'm like, yeah, there's weight classes. There's there's amateur shows. It's not just on ESPN like we just saw. So, and that was a question I always got. And when I actually, flash forward, 5-6 years later, when I started to get somewhat good at the sport for my weight class, because they made a new weight class that was for, lightweight was then 175 pounds, and that suited more my my natural body structure. And I got a couple sponsors, and, I started to get a little bit of presence online, and I just get the question over and over again. They're like, how do you start? Where do you go? Where do you go? And I'm like, and I hated my job. It's not something I wanted to do. And I just knew that there was some way I could transition and provide value in strongman. And I'm like, even if it was just I got sponsors or whatever, I'm like, I just knew this was pretty much the only chance I had to do anything, other than my work. I don't have a college degree. It's just, that's a long story on everything, but I just knew, I'm like, I could make a career out of this. I don't know if this is an athlete or something. And, I started and half built like 6-7 different websites with all kinds of different names, just the little angles that I thought would be, work. And then one day I'm like, well, everyone just asked me how you start. That seems to be the question. Why don't I just start providing these resources? So and put it like answer. It's the stuff I was saying all the time anyways, the same questions over and over.
So what year did StartingStrongman.com officially launch?
I registered the domain like 2013. And I think that's when I made the Facebook group. But I think I rebuilt the website like April of 2014, which is crazy. It's like 5 years now, but yeah.
And when did that start to transition or incorporate? So Starting Strongman, great resources, by the way. We're definitely going to, in the show notes, encourage our readers to check it out. A lot of really good information about how to get started in the sport, whether it's building your own equipment, starting training with a lot of these common strongman implements that you might not find in a regular gym. But something that Starting Strongman, I think, is perhaps even better known for at this point, it's its strongman coverage. So when did you start incorporating event coverage and results into the website?
I kind of pretty much from the start, because there used to be a great forum called marundemuscle.com, and I was a member of there for years, and unfortunately Jesse Marunde died. It was very tragic, and it was just awful, but and then it kind of just, forums died basically too. Unfortunately, I still think they're a better venue than social media for a lot of ways. And so people used to always post like what was the strongest man on there. That was the best place to get it. And then there wasn't really any other good place to get it. So people started putting it on, in the Facebook group, we have thread results pages. And so pretty much from the start, if there's a big show going on, people would talk about it and it was a discussion. So I just kind of start putting the results online because they weren't anywhere at that time, 2013, 14, 15, now of course, it's on New York Times publishes it because Hafthor's in it and it's crazy, but I did everything I did is because no one was doing it, or very few, or at least it wasn't in a concentrated way. Like a couple sites that cover powerlifting or stuff might throw up something if it happened, but I would put up every pro show, even nationals, amateur nationals results and stuff, just because, sometimes that wouldn't even be easy on the federation. So I just put it, and then you realize you have your biggest month as far as views and everything. So might as well keep doing it. And I really started to do it kind of last year. I kind of transferred doing a lot of that because I did various podcasts, even starting from 2014, where I'd cover the sport. And then when I had my son was born last year, I kind of couldn't do long form interviews very easily, scheduling with guests. So I just started talking to the camera and giving my own thoughts on it real quick, because, I could wake up and I have 10 minutes to say what happened. So I started doing that last year, and that's the first thing that people actually seem to care about on my YouTube, and it doubled since. So just keep doing that now.
Now, in those, especially the first few years, you were reporting on strongman results, especially for something like the World's Strongest Man. Did you ever get any pushback from the organizing bodies? Because, it gets a little bit tough to explain to people who might be new to following along with strongman. Why is there no live stream for World's Strongest Man? Questions like that come up. I know that's something you've literally made memes about it because you get asked so often. But did the organizations ever reach out to you and say, "Hey, we like what you're doing," or "We don't like what you're doing"? Anything like that?
I don't think that they knew back then. They weren't barely on social media. They were doing a great job. Strongman's really changed in the past 3 years, but before that, I don't think they knew. And then I've had unofficially producers, big people at all the different promoters, and everyone's nice to me. I mean, they'll tell me what they want to say publicly that can't. They don't. I think no one really cares. It's all promotion for them. I'm a free publicist, basically.
Now, when you say strongman's changed a lot over the last 3 years, we launched our site in 2016, so about 3 years ago. And since then, Hafthor's rise through the sport, his win in 2018 brought a lot of mainstream coverage, because here is this guy who was on Game of Thrones. He's suddenly winning World's Strongest Man. It increases mainstream interest and coverage a lot. Besides that, how do you think the sport has grown, or do you think that's been the main catalyst of the sport's growth mainstream?
I think it's definitely a big one. Basically, strongman finally became clickbait worthy, is the way I see it. and that's kind of the, how it is. We all do it. If you have a catchy, if I put the mountain as something, it's going to get way more views and way more, instead of just using his real name, which it's just a proud thing. I still put Hafthor Bjornsson. I don't put the mountain in my titles just because whatever. No fault to anyone that does. But I think that's part of it. But I think what really started it, because Hafthor he's kind of like an enigma for a while. He didn't put out too much press, too much stuff. He's just, he's good on social media and stuff. But, even then he's kind of, in the shadows, just being strong. But what really started it was Eddie Hall. Eddie Hall was not going to shut up about anything, right? And that's why he's great. And because Strongman's so big it was like a perfect storm because, Colin Bryce, Darren Sadler, the promoters of Giants Live, the qualifying tour for World's Strongest Man, they've been building these arena shows in Europe and the UK for the past few years. And they got someone that the public latched onto, and Strongman's shown a lot on normal television, which people actually still watch in the UK, I guess. So, and it's shown prime time, like free TV, everyone in the country watches it, so then they got a new, English star who's got a great personality, and he understands that it's a promotion and you have to build a certain, like, I've always told people, even myself, like as an athlete, like Strongman has a weird thing where people are like, okay, I'm going to win this. Then people are going to care. You have to build up the narrative to say that this is going to happen and have them follow around follow along with you for them to then care. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like they have to be invested before it happens. They're not going to get invested after it happens. You can't come out and build up the press. So Eddie Hall started it. The Born Strong documentary was big. It went on Netflix. Like who knows how many million people saw that. That they're selling out stadiums. It's shown on free TV. They finally have like a British athlete wins again when it's, the most popular over there. And then people are like, oh, and Thor's just like, Eddie painted him so well as a villain when Thor is not a villain. Like, I think he's a pretty, like everything I can tell, he's a nice guy and he's pretty humble, but he just, you have to have a villain. And he's like, look, he's the mountain. He's 6'8", he's 440 pounds. And Eddie keeps saying he's shorter and smaller, even though he's 6'3" and 440 pounds. Like,
it's funny because I've seen Eddie Hall variously listed at everywhere between 5'11" and 6'4".
Yeah.
And I feel
he's about 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah, he's a big guy. I mean, they're all
not
big
a small
guys.
Guy.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest,
But there was this whole narrative around how he's literally like taking down the true giants.
And he says over and over he's basically almost killing himself to do it. However that's true or not, like that's going to catch the casual person. Mm-hmm. Then there's that document. Well, before there's Eddie Strongman was the first documentary. Sorry, I misspoke. Then Born Strong also came out, which was kind of because Eddie's such a, he steals the show and says the right things. It's kind of Eddie too, even though it ended up being Zadrunas winning. But I think those two documentaries were the big things because they're both on Netflix. And then of course, Game of Thrones wrapping up, getting, how many million people watching it every year, mm-hmm. Last couple, every with Thor. And then, in the past year, like Strongman's kind of taken over YouTube. They finally figured out that they can put out their own content. And Brian Shaw has like 800,000 subscribers or something.
Yeah, he's killing the game on there.
Yeah, he's eating everything, getting kicked out of gyms, and he's making the content. So then it brings in the casual fan. It's just they kind of all built on itself. It's definitely different because like when I put out, I thought about this a lot. So like when I was putting stuff out just a couple of years ago, everyone that comments on stuff were they're all people that kind of compete at some level, mm-hmm. or they've done an amateur show or a novice show.
They have some personally vested interest in it.
Yeah, and they've done they've lifted an Atlas stone or whatever. Now, in the past 2 years, I get comments and I'm like, oh, casual fans are great, but this person's never lifted an Atlas stone. You just know, when they say the stone series at Worlds is too light, and I think the last one was like 480 pounds, and I'm like, have you seen a 480 pound stone next to you? Like, it's above my waist. Like, I can't even physically get in a position to lift it. Like, the guys are just so strong, they make it look like they just don't. It's sports talk anywhere, but we've just been niche enough. But I think there's always been casual fans, but now they're kind of connected and they follow the sport more than just watching it on Christmas when it's on TV.
When I was growing up, the World's Strongest Man was it was always on TV during the daytime. So if you're ever homesick from school or like during the summer, you'd always see the Metrics World's Strongest Man. Yeah. And that was around the time that was like, Marius was competing. Derek Poundstone was like the American with a shot. There were a few other, I'm missing a few other names that were like heavily promoted as American competitors. In that, and then it just seemed to kind of disappear in the late 2009. I think it just wasn't in my consciousness at all when I was getting interested in strength training, and it seems to have bounced back.
It went off ESPN, and I think around 2010ish it was no longer on ESPN2, and I mean, you're a guy, I'm a guy. Before DVR and on-demand television, if you're looking around, you check ESPN and you'll give it a shot. Then it went on, CBS Sports, and I don't think they replayed it as much. And show me where CBS Sports is on your television. I don't know. The only place I've ever seen that has it is at grandparents' houses. If you're ever like at like your in-laws or something, they have it. They don't know they have it, but it's on because they just got the biggest package and they don't even know they're paying for it. It's the only place that exists. I don't think you can get it unless you're 65 or older. You have to have the AARP card to qualify for the channel. And then you get CBS Sports for free. And then when your in-laws come over, they can finally watch World's Strongest Man, even though it's their job to cover it.
There's one other thing that I think around 2016 helped, and I think you mentioned this perfect storm of Eddie Hall becoming a personality even before Hafthor kind of became the face of strongman. And that was his 500 kilogram deadlift. And I remember we wrote an article on it for BarBend. It was, very early on in our life cycle. And we put up an article about it. And I woke up the next morning and our traffic was just unlike anything I'd seen. And we were a new website. And I realized that all these other outlets, all these mainstream outlets were linking to us. It was some really, really big mainstream news channels that were driving traffic to us because no one else had written on it. And while I think my personal opinion is, while that was such an impressive feat and did a lot for the sport of strongman, anecdotally, it seemed to really piss off a lot of powerlifters because you have a lot of powerlifters who think it asks the question, well, if powerlifters specialize in the deadlift, why hasn't any powerlifter lifted 500 kilograms? Obviously, the general public not being aware of the differences in the standards and of the lift and what was allowed.
Yeah, the 500 kilogram deadlift was huge. But again, Eddie Hall hyped that up for a year or two before he did it. It's all about the hype. If there's going to be a big worldwide event and it happens, it has to be promoted beforehand. And he's one of the few strongmen that, he had a publicist. He did this. He did a great job. He said, again, it might kill me, but I'm going to do it. And it's such I wrote an article, for a different outlet back then, that was, I would write articles for about it. And I remember the first time I heard it, I was like, this is crazy. It's just more hoopla, more hype, more promotion, because world records don't get broken by 30 something kilograms, 60, 70 pounds. That's just, especially ones that have been recently set. Like he said it that year. And when he pulled that, he said, in 3 months, I'm going to, even though I just broke my own world record, in 3 months, I'm going to do another 70 pounds. That just doesn't, you follow any sport, nothing gets broken like that. Nothing gets obliterated. So it's just, and now people expect that as the weird thing. They're like, you only broke it by a kilo. Okay.
It's like, well, that's
I'm going to do 600.
That's how it worked for 100 years prior to Eddie Hall pulling 500 kilograms. I know.
Yeah, but so there's just so much hype, and the first time I reported on it, I'm like, this is impossible. He's a loudmouth. It's just not going to happen. And then, you just start, you watch every video, you see little training clips that are selected, and I'm like, man,
he's looking strong.
Then he's going to do it. I think, and I wrote a preview for, it was flowelite.com back when they covered strongman a lot. And I'm like, yeah, I think it's possible. I broke down every person that's going there, and I'm like, I think Eddie Hall's going to do it. I wrote articles just talking about how insane it was, and that's still available. And yeah, and it's the biggest thing I ever picked up by someone. So that just transcended all sports everywhere. So I think that was probably even bigger as far as building the sport than him winning World's Strongest Man later.
I think it was. And the thing that I thought was so interesting is the competition. They actually were changing the rules of the competition leading up to that World Deadlift Championships based on like what he was saying, because suddenly a few weeks out from it, they announced the bar was going to go from like 462 or 463, whatever the record was then, straight to 500. And Brian Shaw, this was in Brian Shaw's earlier YouTube days when he announced, he had a lot going on. I believe his wife was pregnant. He was like prepping for World's Strongest Man that year, trying to go for another title. And he said he wasn't going to do the World Deadlift Championship. But in that video, he said, he's like, believe me, I would know. And there's no way anyone's going to jump from 463 to 500. And I took his word for it. I was like, well, if anyone's going to know, it's Brian Shaw. He's not playing into the hype. Like, let's see. And they literally structured that competition so that, Eddie did it, but I think Hafthor attempted it. And also Benny attempted it, I think.
It was Jerry Pritchett and Benny.
That's right.
Yeah. Hafthor's deadlifts improved a lot. It wasn't quite at that level back then. He's made incredible static strength improvements in the last 2-3 years. That whole competition was set up for Eddie Hall to break the record. There was he did it. They acted like it was over. And it was the start of Europe's Strongest Man, I think. So there's a whole other contest after. It was the first event. Some people just did the deadlift, but there was, fireworks and, the Queen came out, it was just, she did, basically.
The Queen wasn't literally there, but it almost like.
She might as well have.
To American viewers, it felt like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was like a 20-minute celebration, and then they're like, oh yeah, Jerry Pritchett, do you still want to attempt it? And he tore his hamstring. So, and I interviewed him about that, and I don't think he's too happy. He thinks if he was fresh, he would have still hit it that day, but. And he got it almost to his knees after a 20-minute wait. So
Jerry Pritchett to me, I think, just goes as far as great static strength athletes. His proficiency, especially in deadlifting, goes really unsung compared to a lot of these top guys. Seeing what he's been able to do,
he's working class, old school, humble. Just put your head down and work kind of guy. That's how every strongman was when I was getting into the sport, and it's kind of why it didn't quite gain with the social. None of them. I remember talking to Instagram. I was one of the first strongmen on Instagram. Posting anything when it was still a place to post your filtered photos. Pre-Facebook. And I remember telling my friends I was at a contest with Robert Oberst. I was like, hey, you gotta get on Instagram. You want to promote yourself? He's like, I'm not doing that crap. And, now he has 250,000 followers or something. But
yeah, Robert Oberst is definitely someone who's really leveraged social media into more of the mainstream. As we're recording this, people are talking about the launch of a new History Channel show that features Robert and Eddie and Brian Shaw. So
and
it's
Nick Best.
Yeah, and Nick Best. It's interesting to see a lot of these athletes who may have been reluctant to leverage this, but it's to leverage the power of social media, but it's almost a requirement now at this point. It's something sponsors expect.
If you want to make a living doing any sort of niche anything, you need to be on social media. If you don't want to, you want to make money other than going to a job and clocking in, anything, personality or whatever based, doesn't matter if you're an athlete, entertainer, Fit Tea ambassador, whatever the hell it is, you better be on social media if you're going to make some money doing it. But I remember, in 2012, 11, it was pretty, I don't think even Brian Shaw had an Instagram or anything back then. And there's a point where, I had more followers than anyone at Worlds other than Thor.
Well, it was proportionate to your mental strength, if not your physical.
Sure. but and that's definitely not the case now. But people weren't utilizing it, and and Jerry, I was just pointing, Jerry Pritchett's very that old school approach, and there's nothing wrong with that. He has a real job. He still has plenty of sponsors. He posts on social media, but he's definitely, because of that, maybe gets overlooked by some points, but shouldn't. He's a threat to win deadlift and pretty much any contest he enters.
Kalle, what do you think strongman, or how do you think strongman will change over the next few years? One thing we haven't touched too much on, you touched on it a little earlier, was the introduction of new weight classes. Strong women competitors and strong women competitions become much, much bigger in the United States over the last 4 years. I see United States, but also in Europe. What do you think what changes are you maybe excited for, or a little bit trepidatious on for the next few years?
I think so I'm excited that these people, especially some of my friends and just people I've known personally, people I've seen, some of these shows, they've got upset because they missed out on $1,500 of prize money 5 years ago. Now are getting, huge opportunities and able to quit their jobs to do them just because, that it's a viable thing. So that's awesome, just to show how far it's come. These athletes work so hard, and it's a hard sport. I don't I watch a lot of baseball now with my son, and, someone tweaks, their pinky gets hurt and they're out for 15 days. And, Thor's competing with half a foot for, at Worlds. No other athletes do that. So to see them actually get rewarded and not have to still work a job and get some recognition for that is awesome. And I hope athletes, you got to get, the getting's good. These opportunities don't come along. I think it's going to continue. What the trepidation is that strongman is very old school still, and they need melding the in between of old school strength sports, very, very, and the new style, and then embracing social media. And there's a little tough thing. When you talk about World's Strongest Man, not having a live stream, not, it's being a record to play later sporting event is very weird, even though it's been like that since 77, and it's been successful and has had millions and millions of viewers and been a viable commodity. What other TV show has been around since 1977?
I mean, maybe the nightly news. That's right. Just about it.
So really, World's Strongest Man is one of the, longest running programs in the world, probably. Yeah. I just pulled that out of my head, but so you have to give them credit for that. But then the fans coming in, it's just, there's a weird disconnect, and they're not really, so it's just kind of shaky. How do you transition that? And then just, that people just don't get how it's done old school like that. And that's and there's some growing pains there. I also worry, cause strongman's had some golden years before. There's a time when World's Strongest Man and IFSA split, that athletes got guaranteed contracts to only compete for one promotion. They were getting big money, not to show, not to prize money. And then that went away. And then it went, when the recession hit in 2007, 2008, sponsorships for very fringe activities are the first thing to go for a big business. Right. So, if something like that happens again, maybe we just go all the way back. But I think now the athletes have social media themselves. They can leverage it. The other thing I worry about is just, all these other great athletes that maybe aren't, World's Strongest Man size, the weight classes, the women, they haven't got those type of opportunities, where they're shown on stuff. And I don't know, they're just as good of athletes as anyone. I don't know if it's going to happen though. I used to think that would be how the sport grew, because it makes it more accessible. And I think it has from a participation standpoint, but I don't really know if it's viable to make it where it transitions, where the business model is people signing up to compete at these shows versus a spectator mindset. Some shows have transitioned with the heavyweight guys in the UK and other places that can sell out arenas, and people pay. I don't know if that had happened, and that's unfortunate for, all these, great athletes, but they're still making, the ones that are smart get, and know how to play it. Like Anthony Furman won 105 kilogram world's strongest man, and he was on the Titan Games, and now he's got a bunch of sponsors from that, and he's running with it. So I think, the people that kind of get it will always get ahead if they have the talent and the, personality to back it up. But yeah, it's going to be a weird transition. And I think the main thing that a lot of these people will have, and I know I have, is getting used to having casual sports fans, which they can be pretty brutal people.
It's especially for a niche sport, and especially for a sport like strongman, where competitions aren't like a game of baseball is played basically the same way every time.
Yeah.
But if the events are, two competitions might have completely different event sets, and it can be a little intimidating for a first time viewer or a casual fan.
Yeah, they can't really get it, and and I do my best to educate them on that. In my last video, I got a little mad just answering questions. It's just, so, probably said some things I shouldn't have, but, so again, like, I understand it's a struggle. I'm like looking at this, and there are people I've known, and I've seen Martins Lisi's, who just won World's Strongest Man, since his first competition he did. He's in California, Southern California, so we go to shows. I won California Strongest Man as a under 200 pound competitor, and he got like mid pack as a heavyweight, and he was like 237 pounds back then, literally like 100 pounds ago, and long hair. He didn't look like any of the other strongmen. And I've seen this guy progress the whole time. And then when, people start, we're such a tight knit community and family, and everyone knows each other. It doesn't matter, if it's, me or that, like, you look and you're like, man, like, then people are talking, it's like people are talking crap on your family, and they're just sports fans. They're just saying, Aaron Rodgers is a bum. It happens in all sports, but you personally know these people, and he won some prize money for World's Strongest Man, but most of these people live pretty simple, like to get there. They a lot of time lose money going to these shows up until probably this past year. He probably has. So, people are saying he doesn't deserve it. Or like, you're reading some comments. I'm not going to repeat them. And it's just like, really? You're going to try to discredit someone like that? I've seen this guy, for 5-6 years. But again, as like you say, a journalist in the sport, it's your job to, kind of try to educate people on that, not argue with people that are unaware.
There are trolls in every sport. Yeah. And it's in a niche sport when something's just beginning to get a lot more coverage, I'm used to reading every comment we get on strongman related articles.
Yeah.
Right.
But I used to, yeah.
But like, if you're, Stephen A. Smith on ESPN, you're not going to read every comment on an article you write or a video you're in. Right. And it's a little tough for me personally, and I'm sure for you, to kind of get out of that mindset and accept that, you're not going to recognize every name who's commenting on your videos or commenting on your articles.
No, and then that's impossible for it to grow to the point where it's actually viable for me to make videos and articles like that. I honestly don't make any money doing content creation for strongman, not directly. Like, maybe, it helped me build up a business, that, your name recognition, advertising, and then people then buy books I've written or, wrote, or sign up for, online coaching. But yeah, I pay my bills by training athletes, by, doing one-on-one online coaching. I all the other stuff pretty much, running a website's expensive. People don't really understand that. There's server fees, there's domain registrations, there's a lot. But people don't know. They think, oh, he just has a website, and every cent that, every time someone buys an ebook off it, that even if it wasn't by another author, I'm like, Kale must have made $27 again. I'm like, it's basically all that stuff, for the most part, covers the operating cost to create the content. And I still work for the money I actually get to spend, to live, by articles.
It is interesting, even as outlets get bigger, as BarBend's grown, I feel like I have to explain to, well, I had the temptation to explain to, you just oftentimes don't engage with these comments at that level. Like, no, we're a business. Like we have costs. It is difficult to run. We have our writers, our editors, we have good days, we have bad days, but we're here producing the content, and like you hope it gets monetized to a certain point, but it's like anything else. I mean, you have to be cognizant of your margins, how much you're spending. And look, I'd love to send a team of editors and videographers and photographers to every event, to every athlete's gym, but you just can't at a certain point. You have to pick your battles.
No. Yeah, it's not really sustainable. Like this world, I turned off. Like I used to get, emails every time like someone would comment like on a YouTube video.
You have to shut that off.
All those notifications off. I'm going crazy. It's distracting me from my real job. Like, so, but that's growth. It's just, that's one of the, struggles. And I think, at the same, and then the athletes are going to have to deal with that too, because strongman is such a great community and a happy family that I think it's even more ill prepared than other niche sports for, fan criticism.
It makes a lot of sense. And you would know as both an athlete and someone really shepherding this community in many ways and coverage of it. So I appreciate you sharing that. Well, before we wrap up, I do want to ask, how can people follow along with you, keep up to date with what you're doing? If they're looking for online coaching, if they're looking to read more, you've written several really fantastic in-depth guides and books. Where can they find out more about you and engage with you if they are more interested in doing that?
Yeah, happy if anyone's interested in getting into the sport of strongman or just following along. At Starting Strongman across social media. Kalle Beck. Or Starting Strongman on YouTube, startingstrongman.com, and we have an online store, ebooks and my programs, coaching. I wrote a book called How to Train Strongman in a Regular Gym. It's all at store.startingstrongman.com.
Fantastic. Kalle, really appreciate you taking the time. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and really, really looking forward to how Strongman continues to evolve over the next few years, because I feel like we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah, I feel like I'll actually maybe be able to fly out to some of these shows. It might be a more viable thing. It's great to see it's growing, being in the sport for 10 years and, 5 years as far as covering it, and just me and basically my friends. And now more people are interested in it. And I hope to continue to provide a little bit of value to those people that want to get into it. It's a great sport. I mean, I just want to add that the misconception that it's only for giants. Anyone can pick up a keg, pair of farmer's walk, a log, and it's fun. You don't have to compete. Strongman's for everyone.